How's it going? Before we get started, I just wanted to let everybody know that the audio quality for this particular episode is not super great, and I just wanted to apologize for that. Greetings, fellow Homo sapiens. I'm here today with Shailpik Biswas. So he's like a multimedia artist. We were trying to figure this out before we started. Multimedia artist, photo, visual, music, a woodworker now as well, a very learned man, a yogi and a philosopher, I would say, and a good friend of mine, and based in Calcutta. Shailpik, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, and I completely appreciate the confusion. I am confused myself about how to introduce myself. I really can't figure it out. It's been a lifelong problem.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, you got to start coming up with alternate words and alternative ways of presenting. You know, like
I've been calling myself like multi-mode artist, not multimedia. Somebody asked me what the difference is, and kind of like expressing the same idea in different modes instead of taking one idea and mixing up mediums to create it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess the stuff that I know that you've done is like all like you have music, you have your woodworking. It's all distinct. You don't mix them. I haven't seen you mix them too much. So maybe multimedia is not the correct word. I don't know. Okay. Well, we were talking about this just earlier, about the pronunciation of your name. The Hindiized version, how would you say that?
My Hindi is not really good, but it should be something like Shailpik as opposed to the Bangla Shailpik, because slight differences in the way we pronounce Bangla. Bangla is more, I would say it's very mixed by now because of our colonial and trade history before the colonial history, so it's very mixed, and it's moved very far away from Sanskrit in pronunciation. But Hindi, I have noticed, tends to retain some of the Sanskrit bits, but then it also has a lot of mixture, Farsi and things.
Yeah, there was lots of ancient languages floating around. Lots of what the Prakrits they were called, right? I think in ancient times.
Sorry?
Yeah, like I believe like it depends on how ancient, but like if you're looking at the Mauryan period and afterwards, you had other languages. You had like the Pali language, and there were parts of the subcontinent where speaking Aramaic from time to time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's some weird stuff in the history of the languages, but like the Sanskrit is like was the high language, the language of the priestly class.
Yeah.
But like there were like the multitude of local languages, I believe, I don't know if they were referred to. I think they're referred to as Prakrit, right? And I believe that that is a broad category for the sort of more colloquial, maybe that's
regional,
yeah. So
Prakrit makes sense because the word would come from Prakriti, which is natural or nature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the Bengali has like other roots as well.
It started with Sanskrit, so a lot of the Bangladeshi dialects have retained a lot of Sanskrit words that we no longer use or even remember.
Yeah.
But then I think the influx started, and we had all these traders come in.
But I mean, like, isn't there like, for example, there is a language called Magadhi.
Yes.
What's the origin of that language? Like that's a really ancient language, isn't it? That is like distantly related to Bengali. I think, I don't know. It's pretty confusing. This whole category I discovered of Prakrits, like I don't fully understand it, in terms of its relationship.
I don't think anybody does. The roots are lost in time completely. And for example, we have Brajbuli, or in Bangla we would call it Brojobuli, which is spoken in Vrindavan. And you would hear like those who are part of the Vaishnav community, you know that language. Even Tagore borrowed that language to write a sort of semi-religious song and poetry. I don't know what it's technically called. It's called Bhanushingar Padavu, but it's not Bangla. And it's not Hindi. It's in between. It's very interesting.
Oh man, languages and dialects are fascinating.
Oh, yes.
I discovered a really interesting linguistics podcast called Lexicon Valley.
Ooh.
It's very entertaining. I mean, it's yeah, he goes into like lots of other languages. It's obviously an English language podcast,
Okay.
but it's very engaging.
I'll check that out. I remember taking Old English in college for one semester. Almost failed it. It's the only subject where I almost failed in college. But it was fascinating. A dead language, but so different from modern English. It's more German than English. It's actually inflected, which English is no longer. It's not inflected.
Yeah, the history of the English language is also really interesting, and because it's spread around the world, like the multitude of different dialects and ways of speaking English is it's extremely fascinating. And even the way that regional languages and cultures have affected certain types of English,
Oh yeah,
around the world.
Like
that stuff
you
is
have the Caribbean dialect.
Oh yeah, there's a multitude of dialects there, and yeah, it's amazing. So it was just raining out there a second ago. I think it still might be raining a bit. You lived through Cyclone Amphan.
Oh yeah,
that hit Kolkata pretty hard. What was that like? What was that about?
Man, I've never experienced winds like that. In the apartment that I've rented, it's one of those old Art Deco houses in Kolkata, fairly well maintained.
Are you still? What part of town are you in now?
Same one. It's called Ganguly Bagan, and it's kind of down south in Kolkata. When I type it out in some systems, it doesn't even recognize as Kolkata. It is recognized as South 24 Parganas.
Oh yeah, same as me when I'm over there.
Oh yeah. So, but we have a Kolkata pin code. So, But so we have this wooden partition in this living space that we have. So basically what they've done is an old house. So they have divided the entire floor into two apartments, and the central sort of division is not permanent. It's a wooden partition sort of built with clamps into the pillars and walls around. So it's fairly rigid, but when the cyclone started in the evening, my sister started noticing this weird creaking movement in the shelves that we have. Now I have built, our own shelves out of some solid wood planks, and it's pretty shoddy. So I was like, well, if the termites are getting to it, it shouldn't move in real time, and that's some serious infestation going on. Mm-hmm. That wasn't it. It was so what I realized was the partition was moving because of wind pressure, and it was pushing against the shelves, which are fully laden and pushed up against the partition. But it was creaking because of this wooden partition. It felt like it was breathing. It was moving like with so much wind pressure.
Wow.
But you know what? That itself wasn't so hard hitting because, okay, it's a pretty violent storm. I can feel it. Wind pressure is unlike anything I've experienced before. Fine. Okay. During the actual cyclone, it was okay. It is what happened afterwards that really hit us. There was this devastation that, we didn't go out of the area for like at least 2 days. But just by looking around in the half-kilometer radius where I need to go for my daily groceries and stuff, trees, plants, like houses, temporary sheds and stuff, everything just destroyed, decimated. It was crazy. And just looking at my own garden, it's pretty nuts. It's difficult to look at sometimes.
No, I bet the stories that I was hearing and the pictures also that the videos and stuff that
I saw a video of my friend cycling through it afterwards. The day after, it was insane. It was absolutely insane. Trees fallen everywhere. Grand trees. Yeah.
There was a big scene in terms of how much of a not a scene it was on national media, like how nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but there was like a delay in coverage or whatever
Yeah.
But then it's like the news that I watch usually or keep track of, they were covering it. I guess even my understanding of the severity of the situation was pretty delayed. Like when I heard that a cyclone was coming, and even probably while it was happening, I mean, I'm sitting here in Bombay, and I just was like, okay, so this is a cyclone, like it's one of these weather events that happen, like we live through these, big storms, like it'll be fine. But it wasn't until I think maybe a day afterwards where like slowly from the social network, certain accounts and images were starting to trickle in, and it was just like, wow, like this is really, really insane. What is this situation like there now in terms of rebuilding? Like, my mom just arrived back in Calcutta like 2-3 days ago. She's has to, stay at home for 2 weeks, self-quarantine. So, I mean, what's it like out there now? What's happened in the intervening weeks?
Well, it's been about month and some time, and things have started getting back to normal. But what I know from a little personal experience with people who have been hit the hardest, and these are the poorest of people, is that they're still rebuilding, and because of the quarantine and because of the loss of property and things during the cyclone, they don't have much income. So they're surviving on a lot of donations and humanitarian aids that have reached them. But from what I can understand, like I'll give you the example of this rickshaw puller, this guy who works right in front of my house. He has a rickshaw stand. He's part of rickshaw stand there, and so we used to speak on and off because the place where I stay, there's an empty lot which belongs to the same house, but it's empty and it has a lot of trees. And so he would often point out that, hey, there's a bale fallen there, you should get it. Sometimes I'll give it to him. And bale, for those who don't know, is wood apple. It's pretty popular here in Bengal. So that, and we have jackfruit trees, and he would sometimes request for some branches with leaves for his goats because they love jackfruit leaves. So this is how I know the guy, and he's just there all the time from house, say hello. And then after the cyclone, the day after, I was going out to the bazaar. So I saw him there sitting. He looked pretty dejected. So I just asked him, because I was asking everybody really, how's everything? So I asked him, how is it? He said, very flatly, he's just said that, well, our house was next to a pond, so it's soft ground. The whole thing just fell into water.
Shit.
And we've been living under a plastic. And this is heavy monsoon right afterwards.
Yeah.
So I felt horrible. And I myself have been out of work for like 4 months now. So I don't really have much to give him. But, I try helping him out with a little bit of food every now and then. And I understand that it's nothing, but it's at least some. And then he said, he's been receiving some help. He had been promised some help by some organization, but then 2 weeks later it hadn't arrived. Then he had bought some asbestos roofing. And he said, well, I put it up and I have to pay them back. They haven't asked for it yet. So
Did you say asbestos roofing?
Yeah, it's pretty common here.
Man,
I know.
That's still... there was a big scandal. It wasn't even a scandal. Not a lot of people knew about it. But for a long time, like into the last decade, Canada was like supplying India with asbestos, even though it was illegal to actually to use asbestos in Canada. And it was like, it was a story that got like a minor amount of traction. And it took a long time, but eventually, not the current prime minister, but the previous prime minister, after a lot of resistance, I believe that policy is now over. Like I think that's not still the case. If it is still the case, then that needs to be changed. But so asbestos is still super common. You're saying
it's very common. It is very common. I think it's cheaper than corrugated steel sheets or tin roof. So yeah, that's probably why it's so widely used, especially in the villages. And usually there's no separation, so they're probably just living directly under.
Yeah, that's quite something.
Yeah.
There was in the story about Canada supplying asbestos to India.
Mm-hmm.
This was again like more than a decade ago, I think. The footage that they would use was of like these big building complexes like the ones that I live in or that you just see all over the Indian metropolises.
Yeah.
And there's some suggestion that these buildings could be filled with asbestos. That makes me a little nervous, I got to say.
Whoa. Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, it would be unnerving. And a lot of times when there is construction, like for example, over the past year, there had been like some major construction on my floor, and there would be days I would wake up and there would just be this weird odor just hanging through my floor. Like I'd step out into the hallway and I'd be like, "What is that weird synthetic odor?" And I often when construction is going on, well, there's many senses in which obviously like safety is not paramount in these projects,
Not at all.
But then at a deeper level, at the level of things like, weird, things you can inhale and noxious substances, I often wonder, like, what are we doing? Like, do we, like when we decide to renovate like all of the hallways in one of these buildings, we like, sometimes I get that impression. So you're saying things are kind of like getting back to normal, but there's still like people are still pretty hard hit, and also it's lockdown. So like people are, it's not like things were great before.
No.
Before this. So is it still locked down? Are things opening up in Calcutta? What's going on?
Things are kind of semi-open. People are moving about. It's still not as busy as it used to be. Mm-hmm. But supposedly from the beginning of this month, we have opened up, and we're in July now. And I'm seeing pretty much everything operating normally, except with timing restrictions towards the ending. I think it will close up by 6 or 5 in certain areas. And masks in general, but then again, given the amount of population density we have in certain areas, especially in commercial areas like Chandni Chowk and Chandni Market and those areas, it's I don't know what's going to happen. But then I've read so many conflicting ideas about what is the best thing to do in these scenarios. Experts completely contradict each other. Some saying strict lockdown, the others saying no, a place like India shouldn't be under lockdown. Herd immunity is important, etc., etc. So I don't know what to think.
Yeah, when you're dealing with a problem that's live and happening, in real time, then you can see just how much uncertainty there is, even when it comes to smart and thoughtful people, how much uncertainty and how unpredictable things really are.
Yeah.
When you deal more with like speculative problems that are supposed to have like consequences, years down the line or decades down, then it's like you can say this or that and argue from this theory or that theory, but here you have this like live issue that's just unfolding across the globe, and you can see that people are struggling to make sense of it. Like even the smartest people are struggling to make sense of it. People are having a hard time not sort of imbuing their own ideological perspective into the pandemic, like whatever is happening in the pandemic is just reinforcing whatever the hell it is you thought was the problem before the pandemic. There's an element of that. So it's pretty interesting. And, you're getting to see the incompetence of governments in real time, the relative incompetence if one government to the next, right?
Yeah,
like if you look at
much.
The different countries, even within a country, the different states and how they're responding.
And the agendas, and, really. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
The things that have been done under the cover of emergency action during the situation.
Yep. So too much of that going on.
You can't help it. Things will creep into everything, really.
Well, yeah.
When you put pressure on it,
there's a helplessness, but then there's also this sense that I should try my best to kind of keep track of what's going on. Like, I should try, I guess. I don't know. It's an ambitious proposal. It's really hard to keep track of all the moving parts.
I have been on the opposite side of it. I haven't had a newspaper or cable TV subscription in about 12 years now, I think, ever since I left home. And I find it easier to just see and look around me. Well, if something's really important, it will reach me anyway because of social media.
It'll
friends.
Get to you. Yeah. No, that's a better attitude. I mean, I'm never a fan of. I shouldn't say I'm never a fan of. I don't generally advocate following every bit of minutia of what's happening, because that type of news is designed to like hijack your emotional system and hijack your. But it's nice to follow things and read things that give you a broader perspective on things, like over a large span of time. Like I enjoy reading broad pieces of analysis about what's going on. Whether it be with, I mean, we've been in this lockdown for months now, so we're at a point now where people can actually reflect on what's happened, so that type of analysis I like, and I'm usually willing to wait. Like, if some crazy sensational news is happening, like, that's going to get to me. Like, people are going to be talking about it, and I'll hopefully be able to tell if it's important or just a distraction. And a lot of times it is distraction. Look, we live in an era when distraction, and just day-to-day crazy things happening here and happening there.
Distraction
really
has
distracts us
become
from
the default state of our being. We are so distracted all the time. When I first started to observe my mind, it became abundantly obvious that I am distracted constantly. I cannot.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I'm in the same boat. That's the first thing that you realize when you earnestly try to meditate, is that it's like, wow, this is really hard. And it's funny, the ego then wants to competitively repress thoughts. And then that becomes the next problem. It's like I'm distracted, and also my approach to trying to not be distracted is distracting.
It is the ego co-ops into everything. I was listening to an audiobook by Adya Shanti, and this is called The End of Your World. Essentially, what he talks about is the gray area between the first awakening experience, whatever scale it is, and what happens after that till the state of presence becomes what he calls abiding, which means you're constantly in the present, and if that state doesn't leave you, every moment is spent in that. So a full-blown enlightenment experience. So he's talking about all that, and there's this phenomena that he talks about, where the mind will co-opt any spiritual experience that we have. The thinking mind, the egoic mind, will just co-opt it, and we'll just build a mental structure around it, and we'll use it for its own.
That's a tremendous insight.
It's subtle purpose.
Yeah, that's a tremendous insight.
It is very true. It is very true, because
Yep.
I have observed it in my own experience, in my own inner experience, that this happens all the time, where I go back and compare my current state to my state in the first 3 months. After that initial experience, there was this honeymoon phase. I think Adishanti also kind of uses something similar word, or the exact same word. There's this first initial period of a few days or weeks, or in my case, like a couple of months. It's utter bliss. Everything's fallen off. The mind is there, but not predominant. And you just feel amazing, because a lot of pressure has been released. And then slowly you kind of get back into daily life. And the mind starts to just co-opt into that experience. And suddenly, there you are. You feel like you're back. But then again, what he says is, once that opening has been created, it never really closes down. And that's true. It doesn't.
Yeah. Well, it's that. I mean, that's really interesting, and it rings true for whatever small moments of transcendence that I've experienced. It rings true that you want to come in there and build a house and make sense of it. I mean, that's just it. It's the making sense of it that's the tough part.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why so much of like the writing around and say traditions around these types of state are shrouded in, poetry, metaphor, allegory, ritual.
Yeah.
Because
there's no direct way of talking.
Yeah. Well, it's like recently, I'm going to get all the categories wrong, but recently I was following, I can't even remember the name of the person that proposed this, but like different types of knowledge. And like the intellectual, analytical knowledge is just like one modality, but there's like, embodied knowledge, like, when you learn like a piano piece and you just know how to play it, your body just knows how to play it. That's like a type of
your body knows,
type of learning and knowledge. And so even these transcendental states, it's a type of knowledge, and when you try to understand it via rationality or logic, it's maybe not helpful.
It eludes you every single time. You cannot. Here's the thing. I know what the experience is, and I've been in that experience multiple times after that. I still, whenever I find my mind trying to analyze it, to put a label to it, to sort of pigeonhole it, it's fascinating. It just slips away. It's almost like I know this, but I cannot talk about it. I can sort of allude to it, like the first little parable in Tao Te Ching. The first lines is the Tao that can be spoken of. It's not Tao.
I was just gonna say that. Just gonna say
that. This always reminds me of what Eckhart Tolle says about it. He says that, and then he goes on talking about it.
Yeah. Well, it could be. It also could be another way of interpreting.
No, he was joking about it. But the thing is, you can't talk about it. But then you have to, because words are all we have. So just kind of use them as best as you can.
Yeah. Well, it also maybe goes to show. We take it for granted that we just have language, but like, it took us a long time to develop language.
Yes.
And so it shouldn't be that surprising that there are states that are not easily described via language. And I mean, even for obvious things, like emotions, like love or anger or happiness or whatever. Language doesn't really suffice for me to communicate my emotional state to you. That's at a very basic level. So certainly for like other types of states that are even more profound and like even words like anxiety, like it's hard to tell. I find it hard to tell what people really mean or what they feel when they say I'm anxious or I'm feeling anxiety. And similarly, I think when I feel anxiety, I think that I'm not good at explaining what it feels like to other people. We just have this word anxiety, and I struggle to describe what that word means. So like even go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just saying, this reminds me. During college, I studied English literature, and one semester we had a course on semantics and semiotics. So we had to study the study of meaning. And the thing that I have understood since then, and after my current experiences, is that every word that we use in any language is essentially a contract that we have made with others to say that this is what it is. White is this shade of color, or all colors mixed in one, and black is this.
It's an intersubjective reality.
Exactly. And here's the thing, and this is a very like when I try to tell people that there's a reason you can't talk about direct experience. For example, you can give any example, such as if you're drinking coffee and the person opposite to you has never drank coffee. And person
literally drinking coffee right now.
I guessed. So if the other person, hasn't drank coffee ever, you can't really, using words, you can't transmit that experience to that person. And this is something as regular and as simple as coffee. Same with any experience. You know, if you have never had honey, if you've never touched velvet, if you've never smelled a rose, you know, you can't transmit that knowledge, that experience to another person. So when it comes to any experience, this is true. So why does our mind think that we should be able to put words to experiences? Because they are just contracts. They don't really have any inherent meaning. The word is not it, it's a signpost. You can't use words for communicating any experience unless the other person has experienced it. So you can always just allude to it. And the problem with the thinking mind is that we always tend to take the words for the reality. For example, when a child grows up, there's a period when the child is always pointing to things and asking, what is that? What is that? And we say, that's a tree, that's a bird, that's a flower, that's a person. And in that moment, the child is grabbing the word, and the mind is making the word the reality, not the object. We never look at a tree and just experience the thing that it is. We always go back into the mind, look for the reality of the tree in there. This is a gulmohar tree, this is a mango tree. It looks like this, it looks like that, smells like this, feels like that. But we never actually focus on the feeling. We just look at the word and we're like, okay, we know what this is. This is a tree. But when you really start to focus on experience, you suddenly realize you've gone 3 decades being a human being, and you have never actually stopped and experienced a thing for what it is, had a direct experience of it. We drink milk and we think we're drinking milk, but we don't actually taste it. So now we have mindful everything, mindful smoking, mindful drinking, mindful eating, just everything. And the thing is, that is our natural state, because that is how children are when they are born. And then if they become enlightened, that's what they are again. They are experiencing everything direct, not going into the mind to look for it.
Would you say that's a good benchmark for enlightenment? Accepting that the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. Would you say that
benchmark?
Being in a state of not benchmark again, like that's the wrong word, and thinking mind versus feeling body and all that, did you say that the state of mindfulness of direct experience as often as possible, or in a continuous state of that, maintaining that, would you say that that's something like enlightenment?
Given that I haven't experienced what I'm talking about, I shouldn't be talking about it. What I've learned from the teachers that I have experienced, they would describe it as a state of continuous presence, of abiding presence, where you are constantly aware of this moment. They call it divine moment. And you are aware of what certain parts of Buddhist thought would call shunyata, of emptiness. Although that word can be abused because emptiness sounds very negative when talked about in English. Void, sounds very scary when you speak of it. But put it into context, we must realize that
a vessel is useful in as much as it is empty.
Exactly. And also you have to understand that if you're talking about a vessel, then this entire manifest reality is made up of particles which are 99.99% empty space. And when you go further down from atomic to subatomic levels, quickly this whole idea of particles starts to break down. And all you have, the best way that people have been able to describe it so far, are vibrating strings of energy. And in spiritual traditions, it has always been said that all of this is nothing but consciousness, which is energy. right? It is consciousness which is empty, and it is creating this reality constant. And that's what it is. It is just one thread woven through the entire manifest reality. It's like when you look at a sweater, you don't necessarily look at it as a ball of yarn. You just look at it as a sweater, right? But what it is necessarily is one single thread. Well, this is where the thing breaks down, the metaphor breaks down, because you might have to put knots in between threads to make them connect, because we run out. But if we can imagine a single thread building everything, that would be how I would understand this reality. And when you suddenly become aware of this fact and you realize that there is this vibrant emptiness that is giving shape to everything that we perceive as not empty, when that state becomes abiding, meaning you are constantly experiencing it and it is not an effort, it is almost the opposite. You just realize that it is there, and now you're
just in it. You're in a flow state.
Flow state is different, actually, because flow state is essentially a non-resistant state of constant inspiration, where you feel energy funneling into you constantly and there is no effort. It is a state where action happens effortlessly, which is why it's called the flow state, because it flows, right? You and I experience it maybe while playing music. I sometimes experience it during my woodworking or designing phases, yoga, cycling, making love. All of those states you can experience flow state. But if you can elevate that and suddenly become aware to a point where you have, for those who have done LSD, some of you might have suffered ego death. And that is one small aspect of it, because what you realize is that there is no separate self. You're just part of a whole. And this is close to what, or rather, I went close to this experience a little bit, because in that time, I had this very direct, palpable knowledge, which I could not put into words how it came there, but it was there. And it's this very simple understanding that there is no separation. There is absolutely no division between me and everything else, and it's all one thing. And the funny thing is, after a lifelong exposure to music by people like Bob Marley, I suddenly began to understand certain nuances of lyrics in people like Tagore and Marley. For example, when Marley says, "one love," well, it's repeated often enough, right? One love. What is one love? I suddenly realized that on one level, if you talk about love, it is one thing. There is no separate love. The love that I feel for my plants, for my sister, for my parents, for my lover, for my pet, it's the same love, right? We just express it differently. And love is universal. But at a higher state, love is everything there is, because without it, things wouldn't exist. But then now the definition will become very esoteric as to why I say that. So coming back, there's this sense of unity, which is why sometimes you would refer to this state as unity consciousness, because you would understand that there is no division and you are all one thing, everything is one thing. And so, there's this really nice quote from Ramana Maharshi. He was asked by a disciple, a student, I understand how to deal with my own internal experience, but what to do with others? What to do about the others? Ramana Maharshi simply said, there are no others. Because in his experience, he would know that.
One of my favorite quotations that you've shared with me.
It is just brilliant, isn't it? It just hits the nail on the head. There are no others, right? Yeah.
When I met you a few years ago, I think about 4 years ago, and when I met you at that time, you were not necessarily on this path. It kind of happened.
At least I didn't know about it.
That's kind of what I mean. Like there was a time, like when I came to visit you, like whenever I come to Calcutta, we hang out, and there was this time that I came to visit you specifically where there had just been a drastic shift, like, in a short span of time. And so can you describe that or say something about that? Because I think it's really interesting. I mean, you're always essentially the same guy, but the transformation was still it's been pretty amazing to actually observe as a friend of yours that checks in on you on approximately 6-month intervals, for a few years.
I would say that's
actually
pretty.
It's a pretty interesting process. So can you speak a little bit about what that change was like, or how what maybe initiated it, if you're consciously aware of it?
Yeah, no, I can see it was very, very obvious. It's a very common trajectory that this experience followed. Very often, these kind of experiences will be triggered by pain and suffering. And in my case, it was emotional pain. I was going through a separation. It was very confusing in many ways. And as it happens, when these kind of painful experiences happen, it kind of tends to double up with every other painful thing that has ever happened to you, because all pain is one pain, and you're just in pain. So one after the other, my partner left, I was alone, and the leaving was also very dramatic. So all of that, and then every other existential angst-causing experiences that I've had in my life. At that time, I was 31. All of it came up. And there was this moment, it felt like crystallizing moment where I was sitting in the balcony, and you've been to that house of mine, and it was a beautiful place. And I was sitting in the balcony.
It's a hell of a balcony, very beautiful balcony.
And if you remember the back one, if you remember the one at the back, I was at the back.
They were both outstanding balconies. Living in Bombay, for the most part, we all have like small, cramped up spaces, except for South Bombay. And so sitting in your homes, the places you've had, that always seems palatial.
I can imagine.
In relation to wherever we're at.
Bombay's a little like that.
It's cramped.
Okay, yeah. So I was there, and it was this beautiful sort of late winter, spring kind of afternoon, and I've always had birds there because of the abundance of trees, this beautiful sunshine, and I was sitting there, utterly depressed and total darkness, a feeling of darkness inside. But, something happened, and this needs a little bit of background. All my life, I have liked solitude. I've never really felt lonely, except for times when I felt like emotionally disconnected. So I've liked solitude, and something in me has always tried to become better. I've never really been able to define what better is, but it's this striving that is, I think, within all of us, where we want to just go beyond what we are currently. We tend to misinterpret that into we should earn more money or become more successful, but I think the actual motivation is to just become more present, more aware. And so I was listening to a lot of self-help books, and at that point, I was also broke, which was fun. And this was like, here I am. I've been making music, doing photography, and trying to make a interesting life. I made some money, but it never seems to work out, and now here I am. Everything's fallen apart. And that was important, I think. I'm pretty sure about that, because everything had to fall apart for this to happen. There was nothing left for me to hold on. There was no relationship, there was no money, there was no future, and the past had just crumbled. So I was kind of forced, as Eckhart Tolle would say, like kicking and screaming into the present moment. And I was listening, I had come across his book, Power of Now.
That's a great, sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, that's a really great quotation. Forced kicking and screaming into the present moment.
That's what pain does to you.
Quite a phrase.
And it's funny like that, because when you realize that all happiness that we ever experience and all pleasure that we ever experience is always in the present moment. And we also experience anything else, just pain and fun. But the point is, we tend to run away from it a lot. But at this point, I was forced because there was no future. And the past had just crumbled. And after a lot of different self-help books, I had come across this one called The Power of Now. At that point, I had no idea. I had a yoga practice, but I had not tapped the spiritual aspect of it. It was purely physical, even though it was preparing me for something. I had not realized it. I had a meditation practice, but it was just to calm myself down. There was no actual sort of awareness building. Although it was building awareness in me, I just didn't realize it. I wasn't looking at it like that.
I found both yoga and meditation to work in that way for me, where it's like I started doing yoga just for fitness reasons, and the sort of meditation that would happen at the end slowly, without me realizing it, prepared me for deeper meditation and deeper, spiritual engagement, or however you want to put it. So I had a similar experience there.
I think it's pretty universal, and that is why I'm very happy about the proliferation of yoga and meditation all over the world. Even a lot of people in India are unhappy about, like, oh, it's an Indian thing, we don't have enough, we're not giving enough credit for it. But the point is, it's a technique. Nobody owns it, really. Spreading it, it's really good. So, and what happened after that was I was sitting there in this balcony in beautiful afternoon, and I had been listening to The Power of Now, which I initially thought was a self-help, which it is, but it's so much more than that.
A different kind of self-help.
A very different kind of self and a very different kind of help. And
referring to Eckhart Tolle, I think, as just self-help kind of undersells.
Oh yeah, it's far beyond that. It's something else completely. So the moment his recording started and he started speaking, something about him just magnetized me, because I think I was in that state and it was so down and dark that his, vibration, his presence, his whatever you want to call it, it just calmed me down. Felt very good. And I heard him. I'm always serious about listening to these books because I'm really trying to learn something. So I approach it from the same kind of perspective. But with him, it just clicked. And so I heard it over and over and over again for like a couple of weeks. And at this point, I think I had already gone through the book a few times. So he talks about techniques, simple techniques like becoming aware of your breath, of sensations. And when I was going through this moment in that afternoon where I was feeling so depressed, suddenly sort of that teaching came back to me. And like, let me try becoming aware of breath. And I did that. And then another piece of teaching came back. And as a photographer, this was very easy for me, which was becoming aware of the entire visual field. So you basically, what you're doing, instead of focusing on just the central part of your visual field, which is what we're mostly doing, you become aware of the periphery of the visual field. So what is above and below and sides, obviously without moving the eyes. So when you do that, you actually have to maintain a lot of attention and focus because it's a lot of information to take in all at once. And I did that. And there was just a moment. It was groundbreaking, world-altering moment. And I still remember it now. It gives me goosebumps every time I remember it. Is this, if you can imagine being in the worst place you've ever been in life, darkest place, one moment, and in the very next moment, you are in this utter bliss. It's almost like you're sitting in this really, really dark room with no entry point for any light, and no light source inside. And suddenly the entire thing just goes flip, gone. Like just sitting in this wide open, sunlit space, and it's all super bright. And that whole shift happens. It was like, there was no sense of time passing. It was just one moment it was super dark, and the other moment, and very next moment, it was just bright. And I felt this huge lifting of weight. It was actually indescribable joy and bliss, and just this wordless sort of experience. In that moment, birds, I could hear birds, I could hear the wind, there was construction going on, there was some cars in the distance, train maybe, all these sounds. And I wasn't focusing on any one of it. I didn't have to. It was coming in. I was still aware of my visual field, and suddenly the beauty. That was it. The sheer beauty of that moment just hit. And this full body sort of experience just hit me all at once. It was, and the shift was so decisive. That seed is still there. And like I said, every time I think about it, I'm almost in tears.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how intense it is to describe that. So after this shift, so I guess some changes started to manifest in your lifestyle, right?
Yeah. Man. Yeah. Adishanti calls it nuclear. This presence, this awareness is nuclear. So even if you're exposed to it for just a second, it takes root in you, or rather, it's always been there, really. All that I have done is remember. So what happened after that was, there was a period, like I said, the honeymoon period, where I was in just utter bliss. I barely had any money. I was preparing to move houses to a cheaper place, and I was just trying to find some work and pay the last bit of rent for this place. It was exorbitantly expensive, really. But all throughout that, it didn't feel like a struggle per se. I was like, it's a little difficult, but it's all right. And it was peak summer, and I was traveling constantly public transport. I've always preferred public transport, but sometimes I would take cabs and all the peak summer days because of the heat. But now I was avoiding that to save money, and I was like, it's okay, maybe. But it wasn't so strange. And everywhere I looked, I fell in love with people. I mean, I would just look at random strangers and be filled with love for them. And my external experience was a little wonky because I wasn't really there. I was there, but not completely. My thinking mind was kind of a little bit on the backseat. Kind of, I was experiencing more and thinking less, and thoughts would come. And I just look at them and go like, okay, and then go back to the experience. And everything, like I was also very consciously practicing mindfulness, but I had a very sort of intuitive understanding that whatever had happened because of mindfulness and this practice of being in the present. So I was practicing all that. And slowly, things started to change. One of the main changes that was one of the most visible changes to people around me and to myself also was my diet. Like I was truly like I would call it like cosmopolitan Bengali. We eat a lot of meat, fish, even though most of our diet is vegetarian, but there's a heavy emphasis on the meat and the fish. And I being not a very religious person, would eat all kinds of meat, including meat. And that was very like an important part of my lifestyle. I would cook meat, I would have this shared experience with friends and all. And there was this 1 month period or 2 months period during which, and at that time I was kind of just coming off of a ketogenic diet, and I was practicing intermittent fasting very seriously. And all of that, I realized that after a point, I wasn't eating meat or fish. And I had a cook at that point, and she at a point asked me, are you not eating fish? I said, yeah, maybe it's too hot. I just feel like having vegetarian food for that. And long story short, first thing that went was red meat, then chicken, then fish, eggs went last, and then garlic and onion. I mean, it's not like I don't eat garlic and onion. It's just, it feels very intense for me, so I can't eat much of it. I just, after a point, I couldn't handle meat. What happens is if I handle raw meat, I feel, I don't know, the best way to explain it is kind of this emotional pain. Maybe I'm not projecting on it, I don't know. But it's uncomfortable. Fish is a little easier, but I can't even cook it now, so that's it. So, yeah.
But this sort of just happened on its own.
Yeah. There was absolutely no thought in me that I should change my diet or anything. It just happened. In fact, it crept up on me. It totally crept up on me. I didn't realize it was happening. I remember this the last time I had meat at a friend's birthday party. His brother had cooked meat, and you know how it is, in a home party sort of. People have cooked food, it's home cooked, and if you don't eat it, it's kind of like, oh, you won't eat my cooking. It's kind of like a, emotional thing. So I was like, hey, I'm not really feeling like it. I'll have a little bit. And I remember putting the piece of meat in my mouth. My sister was standing in front of me eating the same thing. And I told her, it's really well made. Can't eat it. I'm unable to eat it. So the piece I put in my mouth, I'll swallow it somehow. But here, you take the last piece. And that's it. I'll have some of the gravy or whatever. But even then, it was a little difficult. So yeah, it was interesting. And then after a couple of months, I had my last bit of fish. I'm really glad that the last bit was Ilsa, a really good one. But after that, I remember my mom brought some. I had moved out of my house many years back. But I'm in the same city as my kids, so they visit sometimes. And she brought some fish, and I remember she was sitting there, and I was trying to eat it. I was like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a smell. She said, no, it's pretty fresh. I'm like, I know, but I don't know what it is. I can't eat it. So she was kind of perplexed and had to take it back. And yeah, after that, I just had to declare that, hey, you know what? I think I'm vegetarian now. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed by people who not always, I shouldn't say that, but vegetarianism, obviously veganism has become has spread around the world a lot, but just even vegetarianism, there had been a time when a lot of people were adopting it, a lot of people were considering adopting it.
Yeah.
And the thing that I always found interesting was the strictness of it, always seemed arbitrary to me. After a certain age, I just started looking at it that way. You make a decision to stop eating meat, which I can understand for certain personality types that can work, like setting a strict rule. But I've always kind of wondered, why not just try and eat less meat? There's the other approach where you can just kind of cut down, and then eventually, if you want to stop, you stop and go zero or whatever. Because the strict rule kind of in your mind, it puts this sort of you end up attaching an identity to it in such a way, or you can. I shouldn't say everyone does, but you can end up attaching an identity to it, such that if you slip up, if you go no meat for 3 months, and then you have one piece of meat by accident or out of temptation or whatever, then it's oh, I'm not a vegetarian anymore. Whereas if you just kind of make but in your case, what is even more interesting, which something similar but not as extreme happened with me after I started doing yoga. So, and the reason why I wanted to ask you about this anyway, but you brought it up, is that you just kind of, your diet just changed. Like without you consciously trying to do anything, it just changed, you know? And when I started doing yoga, and I have to say that I have really been sleeping on my yoga, and I have to apologize to my yoga teacher as well, because it's gone down the tube for the moment, all during lockdown. But anyway, when I started doing yoga, which was 2017, one of my favorite things to have in Bombay is like a Maharashtrian style mutton.
Oh yes, you told me about this. Yes,
with chapatis. Yes. And mutton especially is like an exotic meat for me. Like it's not something that we would be prepared in my home very much. And I love Maharashtrian and Konkan cuisine.
You're very Bengali that way. Bengalis love mutton.
Yeah, it's tasty. It is actually quite a Bengali thing, but it's just not something my mom would cook. And also, like in Canada, we don't say mutton, we say goat. And I don't even know if they're the same thing or different. But also, it's just not a meat that my mom or my family would choose. They would eat it if presented, but it was not often that they would consciously choose. So it's sort of like an exotic, like a mutton curry or a goat curry is sort of like a treat for me if it's made really well. And my yoga class was near this one of my favorite restaurants in the whole city called Jai Hind Lunch House in Bandra, in the Pali Hill, near Pali Hill area. And so after yoga class, pretty much for like 6 months, well, for a few years, I would always go to that lunch house after yoga, and I would get the mutton thali, which is they have one of the best thalis in the city, and it was a treat after yoga every single day. I would go 3 times a week, and then after that, I would be sitting at Jai Hind Lunch House, and it was just delicious. But then what I found, I would usually get the mutton thali, but then sometimes just to mix it up so that you're not eating the same thing every day, I would get the fish thali. And I discovered the beauty and joy that is the seafood cuisine of Maharashtra, which I had some experience with, but it's a different scene than what we have in Bengal, and I wouldn't put the two up against each other. They're quite different. They can be quite different, but it is really quite something special. So I would alternate between mutton thali, fish thali after yoga, 3 times a week. And what I found is that over a 6-month period, definitely over a year, like by the end of that year, I was not ordering the mutton thali anymore. Like my body, just naturally was like, I would after the 6-month mark, I was favoring the fish thali heavily, and then I would almost always order the fish thali, and then if I would kind of be like, hey, I want to mix it up, well, maybe I'll get the mutton this time, and I would get it, and I wouldn't be able to finish it. It would still be tasty. I'd be like, oh, this is still delicious, but it was just too heavy now. I couldn't finish it. And I noticed that just practicing yoga and I think a combination of practicing yoga, practicing mindfulness, of which yoga is a part of yoga practice, but also my repeated attempts at eliminating things like sugar. Like when I found that I eliminated more synthetic type things, but specifically refined sugar, and that combined with like a sort of mindfulness, trying to be embodied and feel your body, I was able to feel the effect of food more after I ate it. Like, you eat a certain type of food. Like now, over the last 4 years, I'm way more aware when I eat something. And when I say way more aware, I don't mean like I'm being mindful. I'm not even trying. What I'm saying is like if I eat something really heavy, or like a meat dish that's not prepared properly, or cooked in a weird way, or used with weird oils, or definitely if it's something synthetic, lots of refined sugars, I feel that in my body. Like it has a sensation. Yes. And that is not something I was aware of even in my, I would say, early 30s. Like I didn't start becoming aware of this type of thing till I was like 33, I think approximately, where I could feel the effects of food in my body. And like now it's just never the same. Like I can blunt my senses. Like I can go on a junk food binge and then all my senses are blunted, but they're not blunted the way they were before. Like I can still feel like if I have a bunch of junk food, how bad it feels in my body. And that is really interesting that like just by, I don't know, by awakening this sort of awareness, you know, you can see that your body is just communicating with you all the time. Like all the time. Like when you eat, it's like and especially if you remove synthetic things that sort of hijack the way our taste and craving system works, then all of a sudden like our cravings start to guide us towards more nutritious things. So if you have a certain craving for sweetness, maybe you need some fruits. Maybe if you have fruits, you know, that is really really interesting to me, and I've experienced that at a medium level over the last few years. Like I've fallen off a lot, but my diet has definitely changed drastically. And connecting that back to the idea of like strict vegetarianism or strict veganism, I think that works for people. I think for people that is working for, that's great. But I remember I was living with, I rented out the spare room to a friend of mine, shout out Kundu. But he's a vegan. He's like really into vegan and healthy eating, organic, gluten-free, all that stuff. And so when he moved in, because, you know, we're sharing a kitchen, a lot of the food that we would stock would be vegan, and all that kind of thing. So in the first few weeks of living with him, I found that I had stopped, like I hadn't really eaten any meat. I hadn't really eaten any like sugar or synthetic foods. And I was feeling amazing. Like my body was feeling much better. And from his context, he had thought that I'd failed. Like one night in the middle of the week, I like got a tandoori chicken. I was like, I haven't had meat all week, and I feel good. Like we have a treat, and I'll have some chicken. And from his point of view, it was like you've kind of failed. Like this is, you're not going to feel good, And it's like, but from my point of view, like I have just been eating extremely healthy for like the past 3 weeks. You know what I mean? Like it seems like if you frame it in the context of a rule that you can't break, then eating a piece of chicken is like, oh, I failed and it's a moral failure. But viewed in the context of I'm trying to improve my diet and look, I've like managed to do that. Then it's just like, oh, like I'm just having a random piece, that and like that difference in framing the situation. I think like there have been multiple people I've known that have just become vegetarians by accident. Like it just happened. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think it would be. I think more people should know about that. Like, is really that's the point of this rant. Like, I think more people should know that you can just kind of like gradually become a vegetarian. Yeah, like it's totally okay to like mostly be a vegetarian, and sometimes those categories exist and are valid, and you don't have to explicitly. You know what I mean?
Can't have like pure black and white in anything in life. And
some people pull it off, I guess, right?
For certain, and like you said, fine. Certain personality types.
Yeah, some people. Yeah.
That hard and
lots
fast
of people,
rule
if you think about
is very important.
Yeah.
But for lots of people, it's a struggle. Yeah. I know that for sure. I mean, externally, they might show that they're doing really well, but I know it's an internal struggle at the time. What I have realized is that, honestly, if I'm being 100% honest with you, I'm a really, really lazy person. All right? Mm-hmm. I do not like effort. And so the thing is, I cannot maintain things unless I enjoy it, right? So the entirety of my life has been kind of structured in maximizing enjoyment. And I think if we are being honest to ourselves, I think all human beings try and do that. The only problem is we don't really understand, and also because we're conditioned by many external factors, is what is it that we actually enjoy? So I would say that there is a third way of framing this whole diet and lifestyle change thing. Is the same advice that I give to my friends who want to quit smoking. Although for most of them it doesn't make any sense, but I think it will for you. When they say, I want to quit smoking, I tell them, listen, I have a solution for you. and it does not involve quitting. They're like, okay, I'm all ears. Then, well, don't change anything first. Second, when you smoke a cigarette or whatever you're smoking, just go deeply into this, right? Just go deeply into the smoking and focus on it completely. They're like, yeah, well, when I think about it, when I smoke, the first puff is like, yeah, I'm aware of it, but then my mind kind of drifts, and before I know it, I'm on my third cigarette. I'm like, well, yeah, that's the point. Smoke it wholeheartedly, right? And then one friend of mine recently, he said, well, that's the thing, Shailpik, I don't really enjoy it. I was like, well, there you go. So if you, and this is how the brain works, by the way, if you actually pay attention, and if you constantly see that you're not enjoying it and you constantly do it, after a while, you will lose your addiction or dependence or attraction. And this happened to me with various different kinds of junk. I was already eating pretty healthy before this whole vegetarianism, the accidental vegetarianism happened. And I was eating fritters are very popular here in Bengal. And unfortunately, when they're fried outside of home, the oil is quite suspect. So when I have a bit too much of it, and because I tend to eat only one full meal a day plus fruits for breakfast, eating late in the day is difficult for me, for my sleep and everything. So all of that combined, I had a bit too much of it too often at one point, and then I think I was basically weaned for life. I don't have a rule, which is a good thing. So I will eat it maybe once in a while. But I know that, I'm not super attracted. It's tasty, but it's okay. And there's one interesting thing that actually you should mention, and you find this interesting. After the shift had happened, for the first year and a half, I would have these memory relapses. Now, what is that? It's like I'm stepping out of a place in the lakes, beautiful place here in Kolkata, lots of trees and a huge lake. And there's a club sort of place nearby, and they're probably having some sort of an event, and they're making tandoori chicken. I smell it, and I get this immediate sort of body reaction. My mouth salivates. And so I've always maintained, ever since this shift in my diet happened, is that the day I feel like eating non-veg, I will go out and eat it, or I will buy and cook it. I don't have a problem. I don't have a mental structure around it. So I asked myself, so do I want tandoori chicken right now? So I had developed by then a way of testing this. So I would close my eyes and I would visualize a piece of tandoori chicken, and I would visualize biting it. And in this specific case, what happened was I visualized it, the smell was already there, and I was just visualizing. And in my mind, in the visualization, when the meat touched my lips, I practically threw up. Like it was, there was no way my body would accept. So then I realized that it was a memory association with that smell. Like even now I'm living in a Bengali dominant area, and there's a lot of smell of different kinds of fish flavors being cooked. And I have very pleasant memories with those smells, but no part of me wants to eat it, which is a very interesting distinction that I learned to make afterwards. So there would be times, when I'd be confused. So yeah, I think if we can get in touch with our body and just ask our body and learn to listen, like, hey, what do I want? So the days when I wake up with this vague sense of wanting to eat mutton, I realize that I don't want mutton really. What I want is a very nice amount of protein. So I would go out and buy some soybeans and rajma and make like very nice, I call it serious dal because it has a serious amount of protein in it. So I just cook that. I'm so satisfied after that.
Oh man, that I can see that on the menu of some sort of hipster.
My Sattvic cafe, when I open it, it'll be on the menu. It's like,
oh man,
serious dal.
That's the Sattvic menu at social. So say a little bit. I don't think everybody knows what a Sattvic diet is.
Yes. Well, Sattvic diet. It is based on the idea of food having three different kinds of energy property. One being tamasic. Tamasic is negative prana. It draws prana out of your body. Really good for healing the body, such as asafoetida, which is heat, garlic and onion, certain kinds of root vegetables, apart from onion, garlic, are tamasic. Meat is tamasic, not in a good way. Certain kind of fermented food is tamasic. Also, certain kinds of fermented food are actually also the opposite, are positive pranic, which is sattvic. And then you have rajasic. Rajasic, I would explain as a way of, this is the kind of food which increases the momentum of your prana. It can be helpful, but only in small bits. And rajasic food is like oily and spicy, very hot, like chili based. And it's very easily available online. And then you have sattvic food. So you have sattva, which is very high amount of prana. So if you eat that food, it is adding prana. The prana is defined as the energy, which is ki or chi in Chinese, the same thing really. This flow of energy through your body, it is what keeps it alive and healthy. And the more you put in it, the better you get. And there's actually, if you look at certain people who have maintained visual records of themselves after quitting meat and alcohol and smoking, and they have taken up vegetarian food, and you would see that their skin is becoming healthier, it's becoming tighter, wrinkles disappearing, hair is becoming better. I have experienced that in my own body. And this is the whole idea of sattvic food, which is essentially what is in India is popularly known as Jain diet, is basically
I was just going to ask that. Is that the same as the Jain diet or not?
It's exactly the same. Yeah. You're not supposed to have onion, garlic.
And Jains, they don't have root vegetables.
They don't have root vegetables, exactly, because it's most root vegetables.
Because you have to pull it out of the earth.
I'm not 100% certain on why that is, because certain root vegetables are in fact good for you.
That would be enacting violence.
I think so, because you're not meant to, sort of. And also, I think Mahavira
it's about the
realized,
violence. I think
it's about
Jains,
the violence. Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah. I think even symbolic violence, like pulling it out of earth, like forcing. Mm-hmm. So you are only supposed to eat like leaves and stalks and
things that fall.
That would be difficult, because there are people practicing that. They would eat only those fruits which fall.
It's pretty tough.
It's very difficult, and you need to have your own orchard and your own garden, which I mean. Practicing
once you get the orchard going, then
30 years later,
smooth sailing after you get the orchard going. But
so that
was really hard.
Basically it. So in Jain diet, as you rightly pointed out, root vegetables are completely bad. All the people do eat it. Potatoes, interestingly, are neutral prana. They have no prana. They don't take it out or put it in. It just doesn't do anything, which I was surprised to find out. Which also explained later why I was never particularly fond of potatoes, in the sense like it was nice and I would still eat it if I was given potatoes, but it doesn't particularly attract me or repel me or anything. But when I'm sick, interesting thing, by the way, sickness. Like I can feel sickness in my body when it takes root. Like at the very inception, when you wouldn't even realize it's there, I would feel it. And by being mindful, it would just not affect me so much, or it would just leave in a day or so. But when I do get sick, it has happened only twice, I think, so far. Like kind of this fever sort of thing. Don't know what that was about. But at that point, I would become attracted towards garlic, because my body would be like, yes, have some garlic.
It would seem that your microbiome has achieved a high degree of coherence with its host.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I literally feel my body, like if I could give it a voice, it would say things like, okay, today I want a lot of protein, and could you please have some good amount of fat? I'm thinking maybe ghee, not butter, and let's have some coconuts. And while you're at it, we haven't had some leaves in a while. I'm craving like a huge amount of leaves. And I would wake up with this kind of craving in the morning. I say, okay.
That's amazing. I mean, imagine if it was that convenient, like every morning you wake up and your body just gives you the list.
Yeah.
Like, go get these things and make them, and then I will work.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like my body has been rebuilding itself, because I have been ingesting like huge amounts of protein, and my sister who lives with me is a little fed up of it. So after a while, she just declared that, listen, my body doesn't want it. And obviously, she's on a different path. Our body's on a different path. So it's very distinctly there, Like, I would like super heavy dals. Like I would eat soybeans, which are known for being better in terms of their amino acid profile, better than meat. soybeans are super wholesome, like super, super wholesome. So, yeah.
Interesting.
And but I wouldn't want to have that all the time. Like I haven't had rajma in the summer. I just can't eat it. It's too much. Even with other things, like I would eat yellow peas, what we call butter, some amounts. But so yeah, it kind of fades and sort of comes back, wanes, and, yeah, builds up. It's a very interesting thing. But yeah, like you said, I don't really have to worry about it. I would just sniff something and I would just wait for my body to react. It's just immediate. It's like, no, yeah.
Your body just lets you know.
Yeah, it's like, yay or nay. Like, yeah, kind of, don't eat too much of it. I was like, absolutely no, don't eat this. Not happy about this. It's really funny. I see my body as having its own personality.
So what have you been doing during lockdown? Like, how have you been kind of spending your time?
So there's two phases of that. One is pre-Amphan, one is post-Amphan.
I was just thinking that while I was asking that question.
Yeah,
I was like, maybe that's
distinct, Pre-Amphan, I was basically my general self, only amped up because of less going out or no going out. So I was learning two languages, French and Japanese. I was picking up the guitar and getting music theory lessons from my friend Nishad Pandey. Very good person for music lessons, by the way. People should go check him out. He's in Berlin right now. Amazing guitarist. So he was giving music theory lessons. I was picking up the guitar, cooking, picking up sourdough, bread making, like very, very nice sort of thing to pick up. I like breads. And all of these things, I was working on my lamps, my woodworking thing, and they were coming along really nicely and all of that. And I was ramping up my spiritual practice. I was looking inward a lot more and being very aware and really enjoying the peace and quiet. And then everything changed post-Amphan. The very next day, the environment was saturated. The energy was just so devastated. In its speed, it was palpable. Like everybody was just in shock. The first couple of days, it just felt like shock. Because already we were in quarantine and people weren't working and everybody was shaky. And then this just kind of tore everything down, literally and metaphorically. This energy that I felt was just so, unsettling. People were just shaken, very, very shaken. And then 1 month, there was this deep sense of, I don't know how to put it, like fear, anxiety. Anxiety would be a better word maybe, but anxiety is basically a kind of fear, a kind of background fear. So it's deep-rooted fear of the unknown, of what's going to happen. And what happens is your energy probably resonates with your environment. And so whatever pain I had left in my system started coming up. And I lost all outward energy, all external energy to do anything. All my practices fell. I stopped my language things on this Duolingo, and I kind of had to pause my music lessons after a while. I stopped working on lamps. I became lethargic. Yoga for the last few months hasn't been super, like asana practice, physical part, hasn't been very strong anyway. And post-Amphan, it just all but stopped, really. All just basic stretches when I feel like it. But that was on the outside. Like the external life was very, very slow. I was in a daze, kind of. Internally, that's this outpouring of this stagnant energy, because fear is that stagnant energy. It is blocked energy. And it was coming up. So I was being mindful in my day-to-day life, in my daily work. But now I was forced to become even more mindful. Because when this was coming up, if I would block it, I would actually be feeding, and it would become strong, and it would go back down, and God knows when it would come up again. So I've just been doing that for the past, month and a half. And the last 1 week or 2 weeks, kind of, things started crystallizing. Like I had let go enough, I had released enough. In the past 3 weeks, 3 weeks back, I had a major meltdown with a very, very dear friend of mine. And I haven't been meeting too many friends, so this was quite special. And it was like I don't have meltdowns. I mean, see, the way I say it now, you can see that there was identity attached to it. Like, I'm not the kind of person who has meltdowns.
I don't have meltdowns.
Right? Yeah. So
it's
then
amazing.
I realized, like Eckhart Tolle talks about this pain body, and it's within all of us, really. And what it really is just this pain that gets activated when there's pain around you. When somebody starts to shout at you, even if you're a calm person in general, some part of you will start to stir up, and it will be like, okay, now I want to shout at you. What is that feeling? It's that feeling. It's basically identifying itself, and it wants to feed from that negative energy. So that happened. And the scary part was, the next day I was in a kind of stunned shock where everything felt kind of blank on the inside. And then feelings started to emerge the day after. And when I went back to that experience in my mind, I was very aware of it when it was happening, and I became aware of it after the fact also, that some part of me was really enjoying it. I've never seen this aspect of meltdown, where I was really losing my shit and just being very distraught and angry. Some part of me was really enjoying it. And then
maybe you needed the release hatch.
Maybe, but the way I experienced it, or the way I interpreted it, is that this is that part of me that feeds on this negative energy, or this drama. And it was really happy to be finally getting through, because I haven't felt it in a while. And the release, definitely, but then again, I've become aware of this, is that release is not what we think it is. If you are angry and you sort of unload it on somebody by just complaining about it, it doesn't feel that. It is there, like a little sense of pressure release, but the main, like, you haven't given it up. You haven't actually released it. Like, if you shout at somebody, it doesn't feel good, If you complain and what is the word I'm looking for here? When you're just talking
misdirected.
Yeah, I mean, it's not still can't put my finger on it, but basically when you are constantly complaining about how bad your life is, or how the situation is bad, whatever, it doesn't actually make you feel good. And I have been aware of this for some time now, is that it is not the answer.
It's sort of like smoking. It momentarily makes you feel good while reinforcing the larger structure that's making you feel bad.
Yeah, it's like a drug. And, so that I realized was that it exploded because I was obviously not acknowledging it. So since then, I have become super focused on being aware of what is happening inside on moment-to-moment basis. And now, more so than before, I am aware that when somebody else is projecting something which is negative inside them, there is a tendency inside me to feed into that. And I can't, so here's the tricky bit. You can't block it. You can't push it down. It will feed from that pushing down, because pushing is also energy, exerting energy. You can't identify, and you can't start channeling in the sense, like you can't start speaking about it, because then it gives it reality. And again, you're feeding. Because if you say, yes, that feels bad, oh, so horrible, it's so horrible, yeah, that person must suffer, you are again feeding it. So again, instead of pushing it down, you're just feeding it in the moment, and it will go back down again. But you're still resisting. So it took some time, and it took me again, listening to more teachings, and this time mostly non-dual based. Like, in any case, I've always known that what I'm trying to do is understand at a deeper level that everything is essentially non-dual. There's only unity. But this time, I suddenly realized that this tendency, when negative energy comes up, and you try to solve it by trying to channel it, doing some energy work, some breathing, something, you're actually not acknowledging. The metaphor I would use, there's a recently used for a friend of mine. I was explaining this experience to them. It's like a lost child. When a child is lost and the child comes to you and is feeling horrible and is crying, maybe throwing tantrums, you can't sit the child down and say, hey, listen, you shouldn't do this, and this is not the proper way to behave, and let me correct you. No. What you do is you accept the child. You hug the child, and you say nothing. Just hold them and let them be in that moment. Now, it's not a perfect example because the child is going through their own pain body. But in my case, what I visualized was this energy came. It's a painful or it's uncomfortable energy. But all I have to do is sit there and accept it. And when I say accept it, and I mean really accept it, let it completely flood my awareness and not put up any barriers. And by barriers, I mean I don't analyze it. I try very hard not to name the feeling. It's just feeling it. Like, yes, I'm feeling like this right now, and it is happening. Feel it. Nothing else. Accepting, acknowledging wholeheartedly. I was able to do this with a specific tendency of mine. And I have been struggling with that specific emotional charge, kind of feeling of pressure. When it comes, it's very difficult. And it has actually ruined a couple of relationships, I think, in the past. Although I cannot be sure, it was definitely a part of it. And when it came up, like a week or so back, I was already kind of thinking about this process of full acceptance, of absolute, unflinching, unconditional, radical acceptance. I sat with it. I don't know for how long. Just a few minutes. It doesn't feel like that long. There was a sense of dissolving. I felt it before, but this dissolving was a little different in terms, it's very deep. And ever since then, this specific feeling, bits and pieces of it come back, but the intensity is fully gone. It's just completely gone. So what I've realized is, and since then I found this technique that I found is like basically this technique that I've been trying to do all my life, not my life, but throughout this conscious spiritual journey, is to accept. And like I said, your mind will co-opt. My mind had co-opted my experience, and so for a long time, I was trying to solve those emotions. I was trying to find the root of them, or trying to channel them from one energy center to the other, or something like that. But now, what I've realized, the most powerful way to dissolve them is to do nothing. And since you practice, you would understand this. Doing nothing is the hardest thing. It really needs practice, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Not doing anything will require so much practice, but it does. And it's helpful, really. And now, for the past few days, I have been listening to this book, Radiant Mind. I forget the name of the author. I completely blank on it. So, Radiant Mind talks about non-dual practices. And, this Zen tradition called Zazen, which is essentially, if I'm not getting this right, I may be wrong, but I think Zazen is the practice of seated meditation where it's called just sitting. You just sit and not do anything. So you allow things to happen. So I've been practicing that as much as possible, not just while I'm sitting in meditation, but also outside of it, of the practice, where it feels much easier when I'm just observing the flow of my thoughts and feelings and not participating. Non-participation. It's difficult because sometimes I get lost, become identified again. But when I break that identification a few minutes later, instead of analyzing why that happened, I just go like, okay, so at this point I'm taking a shower, or at this point I'm cooking. And then these thoughts will come. Let them come. It's like ambience. There's cars going outside in the streets, somebody's shouting something, there's honking, there's birds, animals, and I have thoughts. Thoughts are various different kinds, there are sensations in my body. That's it. It's all happening. Just be aware.
Okay, so you describe yourself as a non-dualist. Can you elaborate, or am I even correct in saying that that's how you describe it? Maybe I got that wrong.
Well, I mean,
Correct.
I would say I have non-dualist practices. The techniques that I use are primarily to awaken a non-dual awareness. What in the Hindu tradition or the yogic tradition is called Advaita, non-dual, literally. Dvait meaning two, so Advaita meaning not two, non-dual.
I don't call myself, I try and not to call myself anything really, because a part of me knows that I am not there.
This is a personality which is fun. And the more and more I observe, I know that there is no me. There is a sense of I is there. But when I try to look at the sense of I, where it's coming from, I can't find it. And that's the experience that everybody has. That if you try and look where the sense of I is coming from, you can't find it. Because the mirror cannot reflect itself, the knife cannot cut itself. You cannot see yourself, the eyes cannot see themselves. So it's essentially, I'm trying not to have new identities built up in my life. So I have been kind of going at it in my own personality. I'm tearing down this identity of musician, which I've held on to for a long time. Like, no, I have to become a good musician. And there was this sense of, I have to be recognized, and, I need to become successful and something. I need to become better and better. But whenever I tried to sort of, push myself, to put myself out there, I did not enjoy it at all. And so I just shrank back from it. But then I would chastise myself saying, oh, I'm just not good at marketing. Oh, I'm just not good at networking. I'm not just good at this whole publishing thing. But in this whole period, pre and post Amphan, all the introspection that I've done, what I've realized is that the greatest joy that I feel is when I'm creating. And this goes everywhere. Cooking, woodworking, in music, in photo, video, graphic design, whatever I do, it's always there. And this sense of being, like the sense of wanting to be heard or known, is partly conditioned because I have been conditioned to believe that it is important to be known if you're an artist, otherwise you're not successful. But then I realized my success is when I am enjoying it. I saw this Zen Pencils cartoon comic strip recently, and so good. It says, as an artist, you start with a great sense of taste, but really poor skills. So you basically spend some time getting your skills to bridge that gap of your taste and your skills. So when your skills come to the point where you really enjoy it based on your taste, hey, you're there, and then you can go forward, obviously, keep going forward. So I was thinking about this, and I was looking at this feeling of playing the guitar, which is my first proper acoustic instrument. And I realized that when I am being mindful, when I'm playing, even if I'm playing just a simple 3-note arpeggio, when I'm being mindful, I cease to be at that point. This personality kind of ceases for a while. And there's this intense joy that comes in playing. And I can witness the body going through the mechanical movement of playing and the sound coming in. But ultimately, in that moment, through me, the entire manifest universe is listening. The entire beingness, all of it, is listening. So there cannot be a bigger audience than that. And for that, all I need to do is become silent, become still, and play music. And so now I realize why flow state is so enjoyable. It's because for a while you cease to have this egoic pressure of being separate from what you're doing. You just unite with it.
That's profound, actually.
It is what it is. If you become mindful when you're enjoying something, you realize that there's a sense of unity, there's a connection. And you know how we experience creative blocks? It's literally that. It's a block, and it's a block that we hold up. And I've only had that once in my life. During just before that phase I was describing, when my relationship was in a very bad shape and everything was falling apart. During that time, I could not create anything. I mean, there were ideas coming, and I was starting things up. And the idea of these lamps that I'm making now, these came then. And they're brand new, by the way, which is the most amazing thing for me, is that nobody has made them before. And this idea just dropped into my head out of nowhere. And they do connect to other things that I used to know, but anyway, that's the thing, truly original ideas come when you just sitting there, not trying to be original or trying to be creative. And since the time that I've started walking this path consciously, and I will make a distinction because I think all our lives we're walking towards this anyway, and sometimes we just do it consciously. What I've realized is that it's not possible for me to ever have a creative block ever again. Because I can touch that part of me which is so intensely alive that it feels like this river that's flooding during monsoon. It's going over its banks and it's destroying the embankments. It's flooding the area around it. It's flowing, it's like gushing. It's like this river sort of at the end of its life, and it's meeting the sea with all its huge amount of treasure. It's all of that combined. It's constantly flowing. And it's not in me. It's just that I am like a little, it's like a tap that is kind of connected to a huge main line. I can open or close it. But now, because of my practice being of opening myself up to the whole experience, I can close it as much as I can close a torrential river. It's impossible. Like, for the first few months of me realizing this, of being aware of this, all I could do is not be swept away by this constant barrage of ideas. I would have one question or one seed of an idea, and in my head it would become like a forest of ideas, millions of trees and permutations and combinations, and I would take one shape in my head and it would just turn into many others. And it still happens, right? It's now I'm just at peace with it. Whenever I want it, I just tap into it. It's there, and 10 million ideas come. I pick one that I like, and I just go for it. And then I just let it be. It's just flowing, constant. I just dip a cup when I need to, and don't bother to do anything else with it. So I think this, as creative people, if more of us can become aware of this, I think the practice can become so much more fulfilling and joyful that I feel that tendency now of like, man, I don't want to release music anymore. I mean, sure, it would be nice to put it out there, but now I just want to go deep into this process, just to enjoy it. And maybe I'll just come out and put things out again. And there is a part of me which is going like, yeah, but nobody's listening anyway. There's also a part of me which doesn't really matter so much anymore. It used to a lot. But now it's starting to matter less and less. And during this whole period, I realized how little I truly need to be joyful in day-to-day life. Like, we are making most of our own food stuff, like snacks and desserts and stuff, and it's so fulfilling, and it tastes so much better. It's difficult to go out and eat stuff now. I've tried, and it just isn't satisfying anymore. So I think I'm going through another shift now.
That's good. I mean, you've always been good with cooking for yourself, and you've fed me a few times when I've been at your place, and your cooking skills are par excellence.
Thank you.
And it's interesting what you say about music. Like, it definitely, once you break the illusion of I don't know like we were raised with a script of rock stars and this type of thing in our generation. And once you break out of that and you realize that the guy that lives next door, the guy or gal that lives next door, is making excellent beats out of their basement and nobody knows. You encounter so many people like that.
Yeah.
that are just doing amazing creative work just on their own, and they're just that. It's really different when your motivations change from wanting to impress people to actually just wanting to be fully engrossed in the process. And that, it sort of feeds itself, because that being engrossed in the process means that you create something, lovingly.
Yes.
And then what the output is usually better. It's more satisfying.
Definitely.
And then if you can't leave it all up to just like, oh, I was inspired and flow state. I mean, sometimes it's worth finishing the thing that you 90% finished in flow state and just needs that 10% of analytical, tedious, polishing, and then just put the damn thing out. Sometimes it's worthwhile to explore that. If you're truly happy with just having a bunch of things that are 90% done, you can do that if you want. That's fine. But it's good to finish things, but definitely the focus on the process more so, that's the ultimate lesson of the Gita, right? You do the thing selflessly. You do the thing the task that you've been assigned. You do it selflessly, and you don't worry about the fruit of the action.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the essence of that.
I would like to put up a point here, because I don't want people to misunderstand. So this experience that I'm having of creation, creating in flow state, like who was the writer who said, write drunk and edit sober? Makes a lot of sense. Like, you create in a flow state and then you become the...
I love that quotation. There's a similar one which is write your rough draft from your heart. Write your first draft from your heart and write your final draft with your head.
Yeah, so I would like to kind of modify that because of the experience that I've had, which is, it is possible to both create and edit in the flow state, because there is a real tendency of going into analysis paralysis during the editing part, and you may end up overdoing or underdoing. But if you can just feel your way through it, or maybe come back in multiple short sessions to maintain that fresh mind, what the Zen people call the mind of the beginner, the beginner's mind, the fresh mind, the unknowing mind. I think it is a state of mind that can be utilized in pretty much every stage of the process. And the most important thing is completion in itself has tremendous joy. So when, for example...
there is a real sense of like a sense of relief and letting go when you actually complete something and release it. It almost feels like you now have space to do a new thing. Like that's probably the main reason why I encourage people to finish their projects that are basically finished, but they keep insisting that they're not finished. Like, I just need to tweak this one thing. And I mean, I'm talking across media, musicians for sure.
Every artist.
You see it across the board with people who are passionate and creative, where you have these things that are all like basically done, but they're like, no, I just got to. And they're really precious about it. And I'm just like, let that thing go, because the moment you put it out and release it into the world, you'll feel this huge weight lifted off you, and new ideas will just flow in. And I mean, I just felt like it was really important to point that out.
Definitely. I mean, the thing is, you have to enjoy finishing and not make it feel like a task. And the only way to do that is to just focus on the process and not the outcome. Like, why am I finishing it? Because I want to finish it. That's it. Because it's a really good piece that I really enjoy. And
also just completing the cycle of creation and
I mean, whatever works really.
Right.
The thing is, maintaining a state of mind is, I think, more important than achieving perfection, because nothing is perfect, and that's the beauty of it. If things were perfect, life
perfection is just an uptown word for insecure.
Yes.
Perfectionist is just an uptown word for insecure. That's what I like to say.
I mean, I can see where you're coming from. It's just perfection has been kind of dumped on us, on our psyche, you just completely disable the creative mode. Because after being creative, I look at my woodworking stuff and it's not perfect, right? Because nobody has done it before. I haven't done it before. And even if the parts of it have been done by master woodworkers, they are master woodworkers for a reason. They have failed more times than I have even tried. So the point is, this is the point that you have to just journey through it. And so once you have finished something, you have finished it with your current level of ability. 10 years down the line, if you go back to it, of course you're going to feel like you need to finish it again. And at that point, maybe you will, maybe you can finish it again. But that doesn't make the finished product any less valid. And sometimes, you know what? I have noticed that there are pieces which are from way back, like 2010, that are released, and I'm releasing like in a chronological manner. So I've only reached up to 2013 in my music now. So there are pieces which I know, like if I made now, would be so much better. At the same time, even though I have the stems, I wouldn't dream of touching them because there's nothing I can
go back and create the magic of that moment when you were making it.
I've tried that. It will just get ruined.
Oh, I've done that too. There have been instances where I've tried to go and rework things that I came up with before, and it's like, oh man, I just fucked this up. There are other times when it works, and there's other times when it works really well. Like I'll find some old idea, and I'll be like, well, I could just make this really quickly and better right now.
Exactly.
And I just do it, and that works. But yeah, there's lots of times, and you can't capture the magic of what you were thinking and feeling when you created that initial thing, and when you try to recreate it, you lose something, some weird. That happens often.
The unspoken part is not there. And I think I can sort of almost taste the difference in the two approaches. Like there's one approach which I feel is coming from the thinking mind, the egoic, the analytical mind, which like, this thing is not up to scratch for so-and-so reason, and I'm going to change it. But it's good, but I'm going to change it. And then 2 hours later, oh shit, I fucked it up. Let me not say that.
Yeah.
And then you have the other approach where you listen to something which was probably unfinished to begin with. And then you go like, oh, you know what? I know how to finish this now. Like I was listening to this interview, Tim Ferriss interviewing Neil Gaiman. And Neil Gaiman talking about his writing process. Like there are things that he would start. And he said, like the Graveyard Book, he said when the idea had first come to him, it felt to him after writing the first chapter or something that the idea was greater than his ability as a writer at that point. And then years later, when he went back to it, it just came and he wrote it. And I think we all have those ideas which are greater than our abilities as artists at that point. And I think those ideas are given to us because ideas, I believe, are just given. We don't generate them, get them. So they're given to us to inspire us to reach that level when we can execute it, to become the artist that can make that idea. And I think that is the true journey of an artist, to get these awe-inspiring ideas, realizing that you don't match up, and then shelving it for a few years and then coming back and having that feeling of being able to just achieve it. It is beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. So how would you contrast the state of mind you're in now with the sort of honeymoon period we were talking about earlier, like immediate post-mindfulness discovery, honeymoon phase versus like, the ups and downs that you've experienced since then?
Well, what happened, post-fact, what I can understand is grace sometimes comes into your life and it just kind of lifts you up when you need that elevation. But you haven't actually transcended. You're just kind of getting a temporary relief. That was one way of looking at it for me. Second is when the thinking mind is completely rendered useless in a shock of realization, it takes a while for the machinery to sort of come back up and sort of to make sense of this new way of being and then co-opt it. So in that delay, the delay varies, and that delay is the honeymoon period where you are just free because your thinking mind is kind of not deactivated, but severely disoriented.
It's recuperating.
It's recuperating. It's dysfunctional to begin with.
That's a really good way of putting it. That's a very good way of putting it. I mean, I've experienced a similar type of thing. I mean, I'm a pretty analytical type person. And, during more difficult periods of time in my life when things have been just, the situation has just been absurd and things appear to be falling all around you, all around me, I should say. The normally analytical, rational kind of mind sort of stops functioning and starts spitting out weird results. And it seems to be hijacked or just, malfunctioning, going haywire. And then you realize that maybe you need to acknowledge this other modality of, this whole other system of knowledge that exists. And it doesn't follow the same rules as the rational mind. But then, like you're saying, when the rational mind is recuperated and feeling better, it wants to go in there and build a small condominium complex or something.
It wants to build a freaking high-rise and a freaking collection of high-rises.
we can put a nice shopping complex here.
Yes.
That's what this is for. We're going to use this space as a shopping complex, and then there'll be a residential area in the back. It's really weird. So, do you have a separate social media thing for your woodworking stuff?
Yeah, it's called I Love Ilium. So it's I Love ILLIUM, and that's the website as well as the Instagram account. The website is a little. I think it's not been updated for 2 years when I first started it. And the Instagram is a little more updated. I'm putting up my in the process sort of behind the scenes stuff. I'm now kind of finally getting back the energy and motivation to bring them to a finish, because for a while I was kind of just caught in a limbo, not knowing how to. This is an important point. I should maybe share it because we've got to the creative process. Sometimes we have creative constipation. Too many ideas trying to come out together. And sometimes we have this sort of procrastination. And if you can feel it, procrastination is usually some deeper part of you knowing that the way you're trying to do it now is not the right way, but you don't know the right way, so you can't move forward. So you kind of get stuck. And you can't get unstuck. And for a while, I thought I was being lazy. Then I looked deeper into it and I realized, something doesn't feel right. And for me, it was, I had created these structures, and if, people who are listening, if they go see the photos, they would understand. They have lights, and I have to put the wires through them, but I did not want to punch holes through them to put the wire in. We just need a single hole, but still it felt like, I had done a lot of technical problem solving to make the proper kind of a hole and how to make a clean one without destroying the design and everything, but it still felt not right. So I stopped, and the whole thing sort of ground to up. And I just chewed on it for a month and did nothing. And then there were other problems to be solved as well in terms of the finish, the preservation of it, which is essentially why wood is finished. So all of that kind of resolved itself in a flash of inspiration. And usually these things happen when I have completely surrendered. The other word is giving up. I just given up. I'm you know what? I have realized it. This is not procrastination. I need to get unstuck. Which means I'm not going to push this. I'm going to kind of float the idea in my head that I'm looking for this answer, and I'm going to just let it come. And so for a while, I was just working on my other internal works, letting all the darkness come out and dissolve itself. And then finally, when I started to come out of it, I was getting more interested in finishing this project. I put the prototype model in front of me. And suddenly it hit me. I don't need to put the wire through it because of the design I have. I can have just a separate electronic sort of module, which is basically a length of wire with lights attached to it. And the lights, in any case, were going to be suspended in this mesh of string work that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So just, I'm explaining all this just to make my point clear, is that this idea, as simple as it is, did not come to me for the longest time. And then when it came, the feeling of being stuck was just totally gone. I was like, yeah, I can feel it. It's the right idea. And now because of that idea, I know that I can now offer various different kinds of lights that people can just swap in and out. I can have incandescent, which is the main style. Then I can have other LED and L stuff. So now not just that one problem has been solved. I now have a whole bunch of things I can do because I've changed my poster design. So it is very important, I think, sometimes to just allow that speed breaker to happen. Now you're flowing in a state.
Sometimes that's the purpose of Dhamasic. Sometimes I think I've heard that interpretation. That like
of what?
Of Dhamasic, like Dhamas, like to be sort of if Rajasic is about action.
Oh, okay, Dhamasic in that sense.
You know what I mean? Dhamasic, yeah, in that sense, is like a period where it's in action. Like it's often associated with certain puritanical, moralistic interpretations of Dhamasic, Rajasic, Sattvic. There's this idea that Dhamas is bad.
Yes.
And it's the worst one or something like that. But it's more like it also refers to a state of rest when things can be absorbed. You know what I mean? So like if Rajas is about accumulating and doing action and acquiring things, then like Tamas is a state where things that maybe have been acquired already can be absorbed. I've heard that interpretation.
I think it's a very good one.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
I think it's a good one because
and also I think so too. It's because I was raised very much with this more puritanical version of those three concepts, and I like this interpretation much better.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the difference between, say, like knowledge is acquired through action, but wisdom is sort of only digested through
assimilation.
It's converted converted into like a type of wisdom or insight. Insight might be a better word. Only through that state of stillness where you digest the knowledge that you've acquired through action.
I think you don't need to have a spiritual practice to slowly come to the realization that morality is dysfunctional. You can't have a structured morality in place for the world because every single moment is different. And there's so much gradient in between the polarities, and you barely ever touch the poles. You barely ever get to the extreme, right?
Sometimes it's not even clear if it's like a bipolar or bimodal thing. Maybe there's more poles than just two.
Well, it suddenly feels like that. Suddenly feels like that.
It's often presented to us with that framework, or it seems like that's the framework that our consciousness is set up for. But also, like my thing with morality, I'm against top-down morality. I'm more of a bottom-up morality person, and I say that in the context of, say, even with many positive movements that are grounded in sort of trying to create a better society, sometimes they turn into like a moralistic top-down structure, and people, are chastised for violations. And so, but what I mean by bottom-up morality is just like, let me just be compassionate to whoever I'm dealing with in the present moment. So it's a sort of mindfulness. Like right now I'm talking to you, let me be compassionate with you right now.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't mean that when you're not here, I talk shit about you.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're not here, I don't have to focus on you in that way. Like if after this, I mean, it's not the case because we're obviously in lockdown, but if after this conversation, hypothetically, if I was going to like hang out with somebody else, it's not that I like forget about you, or it's not that I like just start talking shit about you that you're not there. I don't have to be compassionate to you anymore. It's just more like, well, look, I can focus on the person that's there now. If I'm with a group of 3 people, let me be compassionate to these 3 people right now. Like if I, trespass against them or do anything, harm them in any way, let me apologize for that. Let me care for whoever I'm just around immediately, rather than trying to impose a top-down scenario where it's like, oh, like this person fits into this kind of category or this identity, therefore I should behave with them in this kind of way. Like, I see more of that type of thing being propagated these days, and I just feel like it should start from the individual. Like, let me radiate empathy just in my immediate radius. Radiate in my radius? That's like pretty redundant.
That's a good one.
It's redundant. It's sloppy. Yeah, top-down. Morality,
Rigid
when it becomes
morality.
this top-down thing.
Doesn't work.
When it becomes, morality, I get it. It's like, it's the, in philosophy, they say it's the should, the ought, what is it? Is versus ought. So like science tells you what is, but doesn't tell you what you should do. And so morality is the thing that we kind of use to fill that space, right? Like, okay, well, what should you do? What is right?
What ought to
and that's
be
just
done.
like a super, and that's like a super difficult question. Like, it's not always clear what.
Thing is,
it's hard to come up with a general or universal rule.
Again, this is the problem with the thinking mind, because it's always trying to understand the present moment based on past knowledge. But the past has nothing to do with the present moment. And the future won't be the same as the past. So you can't extrapolate. So instead of being in the moment and feeling the truth about it, the answer, trying to impose a rigid morality based on past experiences is always what gets us into the confusion that, oh wait, but then I thought this was right, but now this feels wrong. But then how do I deal with it? Well, go with the feeling. If it feels wrong, it's wrong.
Yeah, it was right in this previous situation, but now it feels. Yeah, well, that's I'm glad you say that, because it's something that I'm a big fan of not. I understand that there has to be some social rules and etiquette, and I understand that those things need to exist and that they have a function in society. But and they'll always be in flux depending on the scenario.
They won't.
They will always be in flux. But I think the more of these rules that we add on, especially when we add on way too many, when we try to codify our interactions and what's appropriate for how we deal with each other too much, we end up offloading our natural ability to read each other and read the situation and determine what's correct for our interaction. And so, like, when you have real world friendships, you see that breakdown. You see the types of things you can talk about with your close friends, the types of topics and conversations you can have. And that's based on the fact that you can read people. Like you have a sense of the type of rapport and relationship you have with someone, and so then you can judge your behavior and make your decisions based on that feeling. And I think people, especially in our modern era, we're uncomfortable with having something like a feeling govern how we interact with others. Like, sure, it makes sense to have some broad principles, but I think that we underestimate the power of our intuition in dealing with each other. And it's a big part of the reason why I think we don't grant each other as much grace as it seems like we would have just maybe a little bit more than a decade ago. Is because we're trying to more and more codify how we should interact with each other rather than reading the situation for what it is on a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely.
And I think that kind of ties in with what you were saying. Your ShadowBlink stuff. Where can people find that?
Okay, so ShadowBlink is my music stuff and also my visual arts, and now I'm starting to put some fantasy fiction. But since I haven't written in a while, not coming as much. I have to edit a lot of. But anyway, it's mostly music now. It's on Bandcamp and on my website shadowblink.com. So that's ShadowBlink, one word. Blink with a K. Would be funny if it's ShadowBlink. But shadowblink with a K.com and shadowblink with a K.com .bandcamp.com, and also on all streaming platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Ghana, Savan, Amazon Prime Music, what have you, everything.
Cool, good. People can check that out. Is there any other types of work that you've done that can be found online that you would like people to find? I mean,
Well,
you do
they could
pretty
maybe
big
look at my
variety of work.
photographs. The latest, what I'm doing, I don't really have any names or projects for them, but they can check my Instagram, which is at Shailpik, Shailpik. Notice when I'm speaking in English, I use a Hindi translation, it's just easier.
That's the thing, right? Like, I couldn't piece together what the hypothetical Hindi pronunciation would be. And this is a question I had when I was speaking with Suyasha on my previous podcast.
Plastic Parvati,
It's like,
yeah, she's cool.
Yeah, it's like, what usually when we speak English, we default to a Hindi pronunciation. Her name is the Hindi pronunciation,
Suyasha.
like just in general parlance.
Yeah.
That's
There is
the
no
Hindi
Bangla
pronunciation.
Suyasha.
So that's
Because it would be Shujasha.
there you go. That's what she said, right? So so I'm used to defaulting to a Hindi pronunciation when speaking English, but then there's some people, some names where I can't figure out what the Hindi pronunciation would be, and your name was a case like that. I was like, well, I don't know how to say this, but
It's a kind of a
say it
subtle
again.
difference. Shailpik. So Shailpik versus Shailpik.
yeah,
Shailpik.
yeah. So the sh is still
Yeah,
there.
sh
The
is
sh
there.
doesn't turn into
Here's
a
the thing.
sa.
The difference between Bangla and Hindi is why we find it easier to use a Hindi pronunciation during English, because English is a very closed mouth language, and Hindi in many ways is so. In Bangla, we tend to open our mouth.
We got that awe situation.
We have the O. The Shailpik is a very rounded, take your time kind of way of pronouncing.
Yeah.
Shailpik just rolls out easier, and in English it just fits in easier. So I just use that. And interestingly, because of this interesting name that I have, I really enjoy having it. It kind of has always given me a sense of not having a fixed identity, because I have to constantly explain it to people, and it would always kind of evolve in my understanding of the name, because it's an adjective, it is not a noun, and you usually don't use adjectives as a name, because it is.
What does it mean? What's the meaning?
It literally means artistic. So.
Oh wow, there you
That
go.
is, I have often called it a self-fulfilling prophecy as a joke. Like, you name your kid artistic, he ends up, picking up 10 different kinds of art. Well, no surprise there. So
Yeah. How do you like them apples? That's what you get.
So using an adjective as a name, that's my father's idea. He has been an author back in the days, and we're trying to get him to go back to it now. And so this thing kind of also, gave me a sense of not having a fixed identity, which I think has helped me in my life in many ways, because I have never really stuck.
Fits in with the whole Gemini profile, man.
Oh, yeah, don't even get started on that one.
Happy belated birthday. Well, I wished you.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. It was nice hearing from my friend. The Gemini part. I know I'm not fully Gemini because I have other aspects also, but the Gemini thing just kind of fits in. Pretty much everybody gets it. Those who are very intuitive about these things, they can immediately tell I'm Gemini, which is really funny. And I get along super well with all the people that Gemini are supposed to get along well, especially with my friends. I have crazy good friends who are also Gemini, and we totally get each other.
Yeah.
Totally get each other.
No, I mean, I have the same experience with fellow Geminis.
Wait, did I miss your birthday? When was your birthday?
June 4th.
Oh shit, I missed it. Did I?
It's okay. It's difficult to keep track in these days.
Well, belated 1 month anniversary of your birthday. Oh.
Yeah, there you go. The thing you said about having different identities because of the way your name, the different ways of saying your name, and I think I've experienced something similar.
Not fixed identity. Like, I wouldn't say different identity, but
not fixed.
Seeing my identity as not
yeah,
fixed.
I've had a similar experience with my name being pronounced and butchered in weird ways, but it also has given me a sense of unattachment to my name.
Yes.
In a certain kind of way, because like the Canadianized, North Americanized version of my name is pretty atrocious. So
share some examples. Come on.
I would just always not care. Like I would not care to go through the explanation process because I knew that people just wouldn't be able to say it. Like people would just default to Arnab. Like even if I gave them the Hindi pronunciation, they would just default to Arnab after some time. And so I just didn't care. Like it's like if you want to call me like, you know, Steve or whatever, like it doesn't matter. Like and so it gave me that detachment.
Exactly. Yeah. You learn to forgive people, really, and you just accept their humanity.
Yeah, like because you have the other way. If you go the other way and want to correct people all the time, then that's going to make your life kind of miserable. In my estimation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I've been going with the flow, and I have enjoyed one. It's a funny thing, like if you think about it, but I've really enjoyed since moving to India that I can at least regularly rely on one of the correct pronunciations of my names, right? Like it's weird to grow up and knowingly mispronounce your own name most of the time, which is kind of my scenario in Canada.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Because people wouldn't
Do you know what I mean? Like,
understand what you're saying, right? Unless you mispronounce it the way they expect.
Yeah, like even if I introduce myself as Arnab, like it just doesn't. It's not as audible, and people kind of just don't know what you're saying. And certainly, if I introduce myself as Arnab, that also is just like people don't hear it. Like they can't make that long vowel sound in the beginning, and so it's like. So I have to introduce myself as Arnab, and then it's funny like that's just what you call yourself, and then you move over here, and all of a sudden you have the option of saying your name correctly just normally, right? Like if you're saying your name correctly, it's like a special event back in Canada, but here it's just like I can say it. It's great.
It's special every
and. Yeah, every day is special. And that's an interesting experience to have with your name. It's also the confusing times. Like when I go back to Canada, there'll be like a solid month where I'll want to say Arnab, but then it's gonna morph into me saying Arnab, and that'll be weird. Or sometimes conversely, when I go to Kolkata and I can't make up my mind whether I want to enunciate in Bengali or Hindi, and that creates an issue. And then I feel like, man, am I selling out my roots if I what am I doing?
Mixing with the other communities who are generally speaking Hindi. Should I make them pronounce it in Bangla, or should I just let them off the hook and give them the Hindi pronunciation? Because most of them also don't know that word exists in Hindi. They don't recognize it. Most Bengali people don't realize it's a word in Bangla, right?
Yeah, that's same with Arnab.
Oh, that's
like Arnab is
a little more common.
Yeah, Arnab is Sanskrit. It's Sanskrit word, right? For ocean. So that word exists, but then it became popular
recently. I
shouldn't say popular.
In our generation, it seems to be much more, but in our father's generation. Parents' generation.
Absolutely.
And only men.
I noticed.
Only men. How is the ocean only male? That kind of begs the question.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Very true. I don't even know what the female form of that name would be. But it became... You're correct that I noticed it in our generation. Like I don't have any uncles named Arnab.
No, I've never seen anybody of that age called Arnab. It's not there.
Yeah, and it's... I've heard people in Assam with that name.
Really?
I've heard people from
Odisha
with that name as well.
I haven't come across, but again, people of our generation.
Our generation and like Bengali/Bengali adjacent languages.
But then again, I'm going to butcher the Assamese pronunciation, but Ohomia also has very close ties with the Bengali language, but then again, also their tribal roots show up every now and then you completely lose track of what they're saying. But I can 50% understand when I'm being spoken to in Assamese, but I can see the differences, major differences.
Oh, there are audible differences,
very audible.
but it can be confusing when you compare it to certain Bangladeshi
also,
dialects
because they have a lot of Sylheti style. Words in
it's quite close by.
Yeah, it's quite close by. And Bangladesh has so many dialects of Bangla.
Oh, it's actually a very rich language. Yeah,
we don't realize how rich Bangla.
Mm-hmm. Sylheti people, I think, consider they consider Sylheti to be a separate language.
I don't blame them. I mean, I would say it's separate. Like, it sounds separate.
Yeah. And also I think they have like something extra in their script.
Maybe.
Possibly.
Maybe
I heard
some character, you mean, like an alphabet extra?
It's possible. I was only in Sylhet for a day, and like my mother's side of the family is Sylheti, and I got to visit there.
I am not sure where this example, which dialect is from, but it's from a book of fiction in Bangla I used to really enjoy as a child. Have you ever read Tenida? Have you ever come across it? Okay, so it's really fun. It's there, like it's based in, I think, 60s Kolkata or something. But anyways, there were like 4 main characters, all like sort of fresh out of college kind of characters, and one had a like very strong Bangladeshi Dhakai accent. I think he was supposed to be from Dhaka, the fictional character, and to highlight the difference between the language that he spoke at home and the language that his friends and he would sort of use. The narrator, who was one of the main characters in the book, said that we would say "Berale muri kheye eto koreche," and the same sentence in his language would be spoken as "Mekure hurum khaya hokkor koreche," which is 70% different.
Oh, wow.
It's like when I read that as a child, that one example sort of drove the point home that Bangla is not what I think this language is way diverse and multifaceted.
It's super diverse. Well, it goes back to what we came back to this accidentally, but it goes back to what we were saying closer to
way to round.
Well, actually, let's before we say goodbye, let's look this up. I want to find out. I hope you can still hear me. I'm going to look this up on Wikipedia because I remember checking, and there's like there's like other root languages behind Bengali.
I would love to find that out. I have my
so let's just find out right now.
See if I can open it very carefully without distracting. Why? It's like I can.
I'm checking Wikipedia right now, and I remember seeing the last time I checked. I remember seeing some other languages in addition to Sanskrit that were considered.
There must be. Because we have tons of foreign words anyway, so different root like one extra root language groups.
Early forms. So early forms, Magadi Prakrit.
Like, is this the place known as Magad, where all these mythological?
That's a region it's a region in modern day Bihar. But it's also the seat of like the oldest known capital of India, right?
Because that's where a lot of historical and almost mythological things are based.
Yeah, like the Mauryan Empire had its capital in that region. Like there's Patna, modern day Patna. It used to be Pataliputra, so that's like the first capital. That, and so I think the whole region around there is where this language Magadhi like originated. I tried to look for some YouTube clips of what this dialect sounds like. People do speak a modern version of it in Bihar, I think. But I'm really curious as to like what more ancient versions of Bengali sounded like.
We probably wouldn't understand much of it.
Well, that's exactly. Even high Bengali, I don't. A lot of it goes over my head. Like if I go to see a Tagore play, my mom takes me sometimes where she used to.
Now that you need some familiarity with the language. Even sometimes some of the words I have to sort of wait and think about.
Yeah, it's like the words will go by, and then like I'll have to put the whole scene in context, and then I'll be able to figure it out. And I actually feel kind of sad about that because Bengali is my first language. Like it's the language I spoke before any other language. And I wish I understood the more literary, higher form of the language better. I wish I was better at it. But so just from the Wikipedia that I was just looking at, you see that it says Magadhi Prakrit. So Prakrit is this category. And that I would like to learn more about what that category really encompasses?
I think it would be a fascinating study. You should go for it. And you would find scholars in Kolkata itself, I think, who may have something sort of tell you about where to look.
No, I mean, the history is just super fascinating. Anyway, we've been talking for like well over 2 hours.
It's crazy,
So I should probably, we should probably end it. It's been good chatting with you. We should just do this again because it looks like we can chat about lots of stuff.
I would love to. It was fantastic. It's always good chatting. There's so much that comes up.
Always, of course. Yeah.